Hey everyone, John here with How to Film Weddings, and today I'm going to be talking to you about 5 things that I do to get really great interviews with my bride and grooms. So we've all seen these great interviews and these great stories on wedding films, but how do you actually make that happen? How do you actually get that in your wedding film and make it seem natural and tell a great story? Number 1, prep the bride and groom beforehand. In your final consultation, simply just tell them you're going to be doing an interview and let them know how it's going to work and that it's not scary, and just give them the heads up on maybe some of the questions you might ask and when you plan to do it. It will give you a lot more leniency on the wedding day. They won't be uncomfortable on the wedding day, and just by telling them beforehand, it relieves a ton of pressure. Number 2, make them comfortable. On the wedding day itself, there's nothing worse than making a bride or a groom uncomfortable, and it really doesn't show well in the wedding film, so it's just a waste of time. So comfort is really important. Make sure that they are comfortable. We do this with the bride by having her sit down in a nice comfy chair, and then we set the bridesmaids up around her so she can actually answer questions to the bridesmaids instead of to the camera. So we will put the camera on her, but we will say, hey, why don't you tell your bridesmaids this story, or ask her to communicate something to her bridesmaids. It makes it way more comfortable and way more natural if she's able to look them in the eyes instead of look down the barrel of a camera lens. With the groom, usually he doesn't want to be on camera anyway, and usually he's a little uncomfortable talking about his feelings, so I make sure that I talk to him beforehand and say, do you want your groomsmen in the room? Do you want me to kick them out? How do you feel about answering these questions? And I'll just make him a little more comfortable, and usually I end up having the groomsmen step outside or taking the groom outside so he's by himself and asking the questions there. Much more comfortable, and it's just a lot easier. And just as a side note, instead of just pointing the camera right at him, I will say, hey, I'm going to hit record, but I'll put my camera off to the side, make sure it's in focus, and then I'll say, just tell me these things. Talk to me, don't worry about the camera. If you mess up, we'll just ask the question again. I'll just kind of reiterate to him that they're paying me way too much for me to make him look bad in his wedding film, so let's just have a conversation, forget the cameras there. And it really works well, so just making them comfortable is really going to help with the wedding film. Number 3, complete sentences. Right before I hit record, I remind the bride, I remind the groom, hey, be sure to talk in complete sentences. We don't need 1 or 2 word answers. And it helps a ton whenever you've had this conversation right beforehand, because they know, okay, I'm going to be talking. I'm not going to just say, she's pretty or I'm excited. They're going to give me a full answer if I tell them to talk in complete sentences. Number 4, and this is a big one, ask the right questions. You can't ask them 100 questions. We don't have a lot of time. You only have a few minutes to do these things. So asking the right questions are going to do you a big favor. We even have a note with some of the questions that we like to ask, just so we're ready in the moment. If we don't know what to ask, we can look down really quickly and say, oh yeah, let's ask this question. Asking the right questions are going to give you the best responses. And a little tip is the questions that we ask are a lot more open-ended. Something like, tell us your story, or how did you meet? Tell me that story. Or tell me the story of when he proposed. Or what would you say about him if you're describing him to somebody that's never met him before? Just open-ended questions that give them the opportunity to then tell a story with their answer instead of just give you 1 or 2 words. Number 5, ask the bride and groom the same exact questions. When you're editing, if you only have the groom's response to how he feels about the bride, but not the bride's response to how she feels about the groom, something just feels off in the edit. But if you've asked them the same exact question, it works really well in the edit, especially if it's the story of how you guys fell in love or how he proposed. You have 2 different viewpoints that edit really well together, but if you didn't ask the same questions to each person, you're only going to have one side of the story. So be sure to ask the same questions to the bride and to the groom. Hopefully these 5 tips have been very helpful. Check out this recent wedding that we did to see how it works when you do the interview the right way.
We were boat drivers. Yeah, the reason why I was able to go to Kanakuk was because I was good at driving boats. I kind of toots my own horn, but I was. And so I was able to join the Kanakuk staff. Didn't know she'd be there, but the moment I saw her, I was like, yo, this girl she's beautiful. And so from then on, I just tried to pursue her. It didn't work for a while, and then we met back at the lake and we started dating. That's where I asked her out for the first time. And then when I asked her to marry me was at the exact same dock that I asked her out on. So I drove her to all the same spots, and so getting married at a lake is just fitting.
He's a giant goofball, but loves like a teddy bear and is the most passionate person I've ever met, and channels that to loving others and serving others with everything that he is.
Easily the most joyful and passionate person I've ever met in my life, hands down. So she walks into a room and you look at her and you know that she's there, and that's just joy just radiates through her, and it's probably the most incredible thing ever.
Thank you so much for following along. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. We'd love to hear the questions you ask. We'd love to hear tips that you do. We don't know everything, but these are just some of the things that we do to get great interviews. As always, please subscribe to the channel below. Hit that bell so you'll get a notification every time that we post, and we will see you in the next film.